Hello. Today is the 13th of January, which in the medieval Scottish saints calendar was the feast day of St Mungo, also known as St Kentigern, the patron saint of Glasgow. It was on this day in 614 AD that he died. My name is William Kinnaird. I'm a Blue Badge guide with the Scottish Tourist Guides Association, and I'd like to tell you the story of the remarkable circumstances said to surround the birth of Glasgow's patron saint. This is Glasgow Cathedral. The present building dates mostly from the late 1200s, but its alternate name, the Church of St Mungo, hints at its origins being much earlier. Certainly this site later became a centre of spiritual pilgrimage, and the journey here was equal in spiritual merit to a journey to Rome itself. Descending into the crypt of Glasgow Cathedral, we can point to the very place where the remains of St Mungo were believed to lie, and at which on this date every year pilgrims flocked from far and wide. It was said that at St Mungo's tomb, sight is restored to the blind, hearing to the deaf, the power of walking to the lame, strength of limb to the paralytic, a sound mind to the insane, speech to the dumb, cleanness of skin to the lepers. Such a man must have been very special for his remains to have such divine power. Much was written after his time about the wonders of this man, so surely there was something remarkable about his origins, something extraordinary about how he was born. That is the substance of our story. But for that we must go some distance away from Glasgow to the other side of Scotland. This is Traprain Law in East Lothian. The story of St Mungo starts here, around the year 518 AD. What we think of as Scotland today was at that time a collection of small kingdoms, and the people who lived in this area of southeast Scotland were called the Gododin. Now, they were not a Christianised people. Their king was called Loth, from which the name Lothian is derived, and Loth had a daughter who was a secret believer. Now, not only was she a believer, but she also aspired to be like the Virgin Mary, whom she had heard of. She knew that although Mary was the mother of Jesus Christ, that she had never known a man. And so this princess too determined that she would forgo marriage and live a chaste life. Now, somehow or other the princess got pregnant, and despite the interrogations of her father, she maintained staunchly that she didn't know how it had happened, and she didn't know who the father was at all. Now, the later medieval accounts of this dismiss the idea that this was another virgin myth. They say that that is a foolish idea. But they ask us just to consider it as being some kind of miracle, in that this girl, her prayer for chastity was answered, but at the same time she would be the instrument through which this great man of God would be brought into the world. Now, that was all very well for the medieval theologians to theorize like that, but the Gododin people of the time, at least the lawmakers, the powers that be, didn't really have time for such theological and metaphysical speculations. They had more practical things in mind, and their law stated that a girl who became with child while still under her father's roof should be put to death. And that's where this hill comes into the story, because the punishment for such a crime was to be thrown from a high cliff. As she was brought here to the edge of the cliff, the princess called out in prayer, saying, "O Mary, blessed among women, pardon the iniquity of thine handmaid, for I have done very foolishly."
Deliver me from the imminent precipice, that the blessed name of thy Son may be forever magnified in the sight of these people. Moreover, the fruit which I bear in my womb, I promise to thy Son and to thee as a special property, to be thy servant all the days of his life. And then they cast her over the edge. To everyone's astonishment, the princess survived the terrible fall. And as those who were at the bottom gathered round her to attend to her, some of them said, maybe this Christian God in which she believes did help her. Maybe she is a holy, virtuous woman after all. But others said, they were of a different opinion. They said that no, that it was by sorcery that she mitigated the force of the fall. And that was all the more reason to put her to death, because she had revealed herself to be a witch. This latter group prevailed with the king, who, not wishing to be seen to consider himself above the law, acceded to their demands and allowed his daughter to be placed into the hands of the witch slayers.
The punishment they devised for her was to be cast out to sea.
The princess was brought here to the shore. She was dumped into a little boat of skins with no paddle. She was towed out into the middle of the water and then left to the mercy of the wind and waves as the night engulfed her. Left alone, drifting in the dark, far from land, we're told that in her helplessness the princess again earnestly entreated the God she scarcely knew, begging him that even if she were to perish, that he would spare the innocent offspring which thou hast willed should be formed within my womb, so that the child would become a mighty servant of God. Overnight, the little boat somehow drifted a considerable distance upstream, and before dawn came to rest on the opposite shore at the village of Kouros. The princess, now entering the labour of childbirth, dragged herself onto the land and found the embers of a fire which she succeeded in reanimating. And there, without any companions, whether human or animal, without so much as the roof of a humble stable over her head, she went into labour and delivered herself of a male child. There happened to be some herdsmen nearby who, on returning to the fire they'd made the previous evening, found the mother and child. They treated her kindly and decided the best refuge for her would be the local monastery, of which the abbot was the renowned St. Serf, or Servanus. Servanus, as a holy man, had already been long in prayer even by that early hour, and he had had a vision of angels chanting their mellifluous praises on high. And so he knew beforehand that something miraculous had happened. Well, at least that's the way one of the extant accounts presents the scene of the shepherds arriving at the monastery gate with the mother and child. The other account is a little more prosaic, saying that the shepherds told Servanus of the miraculous scene they had just witnessed, but there's Servanus replying rather cynically in his own language, which was more like Welsh than our modern Scots Gaelic, said, "Ah, Jacob Forshin," which the writer helpfully tells us, translated into Latin, is "O utinam si sic esset," and interpreted into our modern vernacular would be something like, "Aye, right." But remembering that while praying earlier, it was as if he had heard angels singing Gloria in Excelsis, Servanus quickly put his scepticism aside and hurried to see what it was the heavenly host had been celebrating. He took the miracle child in his arms and said in his language, "Mungu, Mungu," which roughly translated is "Dear Gentle One." Sometime after receiving refuge in the monastery, the princess, now able to practice her faith openly, was welcomed with her son into the community via the waters of baptism. The officiator was Servanus himself, and he gave the boy the lofty name Kentigern, which means something like Principal Lord or Lord of Lords. But ever after he still preferred to call him affectionately Mungo, dear gentle one. And that is why the saint is known to this day by both names, Kentigern and Mungo. But what about his mother, you ask? What about the princess, who's so far been a shadowy, nameless figure in our story? The name Servanas gave to her at her baptism is more difficult to pin down, as in the tradition she's referred to by a bewildering number of variations on the one theme. But the name by which Mungo's mother is most known today is another one yet, one which most people would think of as a man's name. Why in Glasgow do we have a St Enoch Square, St Enoch's Underground Station, St Enoch Shopping Centre? It's because at some point in time her name, Tenu or Denu, got metamorphosed into Enoch, and St Enoch is the name by which the mother of Glasgow's patron saint, St Mungo, is known today. We started off in Glasgow, and now we're back in Glasgow. And we said that this child who was born in Couros in Fife eventually became the patron saint of Glasgow. How come? A good question. But that is the substance of another story, another time.